And I'd just like to welcome everyone that's logged on and listening to us and participating in ITART's first ever spring meeting online. And we were all just talking about how thrilled we are. My name is Lisa Voss, by the way.
Yeah,
I should introduce myself. And we're thrilled with just the number of participants and the wide variety of topics that we have from our presenters. I just think it's a quality outing today, and I'm glad that this will be available and recorded so we can go back and review it or share it with people who weren't able to view today. So I want to thank Krista and Becky for all their hard work, and especially Krista for the tech know-how. And
no problem, yeah.
And I hope we get good questions, and I hope everyone learned something new.
Yeah.
So I think we should get started with our brave first presenter. This is Karen, is it Connell?
Yes.
Yes. From Columbus Public Library, a reference librarian, and I think this sounds like a great topic. iPads in your library, you can make this happen. So let's get going with Karen's presentation.
All right, like I said, my name's Karen Connell, and I'm the reference librarian at Columbus Public Library in Columbus, Nebraska. My coworkers and I, we've attended quite a few presentations and workshops that describe all the possibilities available using iPads in the libraries, but none that really showed us how to do it. It seemed so daunting of a task, and we didn't even know where to start. So we just sort of jumped in and learned as we went along through trial and error. And now that we're at a place where we feel like we've got it figured out, for now at least, everything's always changing, of course, I just wanted to share our experience and show other libraries how it can be done, and that it's really not that difficult. So you can make this happen. So why I? Well, we chose iOS, which is Apple, over Android because we knew of more options available with iOS for security and restrictions. We understood the demand for iPads would probably be satisfied with tablets of any kind, but knew that patrons would probably still refer to them as iPads, which would drive me crazy. So we opted, that was one of our reasons for opting for iPads. Also, since iPads are used heavily in schools and libraries and even businesses, we figured it would be pretty easy to locate tethers and cases and all the other things that we might need that would fit iPads, which are a pretty standard size and shape, versus the multitude of available Android tablets. So Rochelle, our young adult librarian, contacted Apple and was assigned a sales rep. Since there are not library discounts like those available to schools, we were able to save money by purchasing refurbished devices. So basically, Apple would take older devices, completely wipe everything off of them, make sure that they're like brand new. And they come with the same basic warranty and include chargers and cords. So it's a pretty good deal. We did order in bulk, which granted us a small discount, about 3%. And of course, we had our tax exempt status, and that saved us some money as well. So we were able to get a refurbished iPad 2 for $280, which is not that bad. So some extra things that you'll need, not just the device. First, you'll want a screen protector, and those are pretty easy to find, and they're available from Amazon or any sort of technology store for very little money. For example, the last batch that we purchased, we got from Amazon, and they came in packages of 6 for about $3. So 50 cents each is pretty affordable. And we bought extra because they tend to get scratched, and they don't make it on right the first time, every time. So sometimes you try to get it on the iPad and it's a little off center. Well, you've got to start with another one. So we always recommend buying it extra. And then you'll want to have something to clean them with. So any sort of tech screen cleaner or a microfiber cloth, that'll do just fine. We've tried the individual wet wipes that are for screens, and a screen spray with a cloth, a variety of brands. There really is no difference in what we use, but the screens do get pretty grimy. So they do need to be cleaned on a regular basis, and that's just something that we have staff do each night when they charge the iPads. It's just wipe down the screen, get the fingerprints off, and they'll be ready to go for the next day. And we also knew that noise would be an issue if patrons wanted to use the iPads to watch videos or listen to music. And while we don't insist on silence in the library, we do ask patrons who are being consistently loud to quiet down, and we also ask patrons whose devices are consistently producing sound to turn down the volume or to use headphones. So to head off this potential problem with the iPads, laying around and producing noise, we purchased a bulk quantity of earbuds and have them available for patrons to buy. It's about $1, so not too expensive. We thought about just providing them and having them attached to the iPads at all times, but just the hassle of them going missing and, of course, sanitation with earbuds, we opted to just have them available for $1. And so far, it hasn't been a problem. Most people prefer to bring in their own or buy the ones for $1. And we haven't had any issues about asking people to either just turn down the volume or use the headphones. So for our first round of iPads, we knew we wanted them tethered to various pieces of furniture. I've got some photos here just throughout the building. We didn't want them mounted on stands because we wanted patrons to be able to hold them and sit comfortably while they use them. So we investigated and purchased some plastic security cases and tether cables with combination locks. And then we looped them through anchors, like in this photo, that we had screwed to the underside of tables, or we just looped them around furniture arms like this. We liked the idea of a combination lock, so they would be easy for staff to untether if necessary, like to do an update or to charge it during the day. Just easier for staff to remember one combination versus having to coordinate multiple keys. But this was definitely a learning experience, so we thought that, hey, $50 for a case and a tether, that sounds like a lot. It's probably going to be high quality, but it wasn't. So after about 3 months, the cases started to crack, and we could see where patrons had sort of tried to pry them open. They just didn't seem very sturdy. And we also saw that the combination locks, while very convenient for staff, were just not going to hold up over time. The prongs that sort of keep it locked started to straighten out and would eventually just slip in and out of the locking point, no matter what the combination was set to. So we tried to work with MacLocks, which is who we purchased these from, to find other options to replace what we felt was a defective product, but they weren't really willing to work with us, so we found another option. So this time we got smart, and instead of ordering cases and tethers for all of our devices at once, we just got some samples. So obviously pictures on a website and the price weren't going to be good indicators of how sturdy the product would actually be. So we ordered a variety of cases and tethers from multiple companies just to try them out and see which ones we liked the best. And our favorite was from Kensington. Got a picture. And it's about $80 for the case and the locking cable. The plastic case from Kensington we liked because it was thick and sturdy, so it protects the iPad, and then the locks are also secure, which protects it from theft. So the only downside to this version was that we had to label the cables and the locks with their coordinating keys, but that's simple enough with the permanent marker, so that wasn't a big issue. We tried, like I said, a variety of cases, and some seemed really sturdy. They were made out of like a thin metal, but they didn't protect the device. They just went around the edge, and we thought, well, if someone drops it, we want something that might protect the iPad a little bit better. So that's why we ended up with Kensington. So that sort of takes care of the physical setup. But there's still the software to deal with. How do we make the iPad secure and keep patrons from using certain apps like email or to keep their information private? So we chose to create one email account that would be dedicated for these patron access devices for each age group. So in our building, we divide things up by children's, young adults, and adults. So we basically created 3 email accounts, and those email accounts do nothing else but work for these devices. So it's not a matter of patrons being able to access library information. So using these emails, we then created corresponding Apple IDs for each group. And this was partly because Apple only allows a certain number of devices per ID. And we figured if we kept adding, then we would have to add another email, and then it would just get overwhelming. So we liked to keep them separate. But it was also to simplify management, since each age group would have different apps installed on the devices. So initially, we were going to use iPhone configuration, and yes, I realize it's called iPhone, but it works for iPads too. So we were going to use that to install the apps, as well as make the restriction profiles. But we discovered that there really isn't a benefit to using iPhone configuration for app installation. iTunes is much faster for that, and if you sync to iCloud, you can be sure that all your devices have the same settings and the same apps installed simply by restoring from a saved backup. So initially we were trying to do things one at a time on each device and try not to use iCloud, but it became too cumbersome. So we thought sync from that backup and you won't have to go in and install apps on each device. So I've got some screenshots here. The first is of iTunes when you're looking at the summary page with your iPad plugged in. And this up here is where you can see what you've named the iPad. You can change that name on this screen. You can set it to automatically back up from iCloud, and you can, again, restore or set up a new device within a previous saved backup. And then there's some other settings on this page, but this is where we can see the apps that are installed and the apps that we have downloaded. So obviously this iPad needed some updates, which is why I had it plugged in. And you can from here remove or update, and it's just really simple and quick with iTunes. You can also customize from your computer where you want the various icons for apps instead of on each device individually going in and moving the icons to the various home screens that you choose. We also use the app Find My iPhone, and again, it says iPhone, but it's also for iPad. So if one of the devices goes missing, we can track it or shut it down, wipe the information, etc. We learned that during the initial setup of the iPad, before setting the restrictions, this app must be given account access. One of the restrictions we put on our iPads was not allowing changes to account access. But if we didn't allow Find My iPhone access to the account, we couldn't go in and change it later, and it wouldn't communicate. And so we had the apps all installed, but none of them were set up, and so we really couldn't track any of our devices. So that was a learning experience too. Basically, once all the apps are installed on the device itself, go into the iCloud and the location services settings and just click a button, and it will allow access for that app. So we did end up using iPhone configuration after all, not for apps, but to manage the restrictions on the devices. With iPhone configuration, we can create a profile of settings, such as not allowing downloads or not allowing access to the camera, setting up the Wi-Fi network, things like that. And it can be installed on each device, the profile can, instead of going to alter each of those settings on each device individually. So as you can imagine, it saves a lot of time. I've got some screenshots for that too, so you can see what it's like. The iPhone configuration utility, it's a free download. We put this on our PC, and I've just sort of blacked out the serial numbers for the presentation. But this is just a summary screen. It shows the names of all the devices that you've used iPhone configuration for. And then this shows the configuration profile. So as you can see, you can change the name, You can give a little description, all these other settings on this side. We use the restrictions setting to choose what we want to allow or not allow. And it's different for the various iPads per age group. So for example, this is the adult profile. So we don't allow use of the camera. But in the teen space, this is checked, which means you can use the camera, and then on each iPad, the young adult librarian goes in and allows it or doesn't allow it, depending on what she's got going on. We have some cool Sphero robots, and they need the camera to work, so she doesn't want to uninstall the profile each time. She wants that to be a setting that she can change on whichever device she wants and not have it consistent across the board. So it's pretty flexible what you can do with this. We also use it to set up our Wi-Fi network. In the library, we have 2 patron Wi-Fi networks. One is for patrons walking in the door, and they have to accept a use policy on their device in order to log on. And this one is just for our devices that we're giving to the patron, so they're not having to go through that screen to accept the use policy. It stays connected all the time. It does require, as you can see, a really long password. So we go ahead and set up the Wi-Fi network as part of the configuration profile. That way we don't have to do it on each device. Again, it just saves us a lot of time. So once the apps are all installed, then you can install the configuration profile. And then on each device, we do still have to go in and manage a few restrictions individually. For example, in the teen space, she does the camera. And then we do some others on the rest of the iPads just to not allow changes to various settings like the account or the calendar or location. If you didn't cut off the ability to allow changes, then a patron could go into settings and change that. So maybe Find My iPhone wouldn't be able to track the device. So that's not something we want them to be able to change. Which brings us to apps. And of course, there are so many apps from which to choose. There's no way I could talk about all the ones that are available. But we add more every so often. We started with just our library apps, like Mango and Overdrive, Frigo Music, Zinio, on all of the devices, because those are resources that we subscribe to, and they have apps. In addition, the children's iPads have educational games and puzzles. The Teen Space iPads have the educational, creative, and fun apps, and those that correspond to the Sphero robots that I mentioned earlier. And we included games on the adult iPads as well as reference apps, such as the dictionary or thesaurus. We've got some fun science apps on there too. And then, of course, on all of our devices, we make a shortcut to the homepage of our website and to our online catalog. So for apps that require accounts, even free accounts, we go ahead and sign in with accounts that we've created just for those patron access apps. For example, to read the library's free magazines on Zinio, you have to have your account created. And instead of asking patrons to sign in with theirs and then remembering to log out, we just sign in with one that we've created just for the iPads. So it's just for that purpose, nothing else. Again, patrons aren't able to read, personal library emails going back and forth and accessing passwords and stuff like that. Those emails and those accounts are just for those patron access apps. So that's sort of how we're managing our tethered iPads, and we'll be doing some in-library checkout iPads much the same way. I'm kind of working on that right now. I've put together some step-by-step instructions on how to use iTunes and iPhone configuration that we used and then modified as we went. And I'll send those with my presentation to Krista, so feel free to download that and use it or tweak it however it works for your library. And that concludes my presentation. So are there any questions anyone has about what we did or just the process in general?
Yes, thanks, Sorry, just looking at my screen. Yes, thanks, Karen. Yes, we do have a couple of questions that came in.
Okay, awesome.
Going back to when you had talking about the security cases and the locks, did the case on them provide drop protection? Did it do much for like people dropping them on the floor or the table, I guess?
Well, the first cases that we had, maybe. Debatable. It wasn't a very sturdy plastic. It just seemed pretty flimsy. The cases we have now, I feel like they would. Obviously, if someone dropped it screen down on a sharp object, okay, no case is going to protect from that, so no. But just in general, they do. They're pretty thick, sturdy plastic, and they do have sort of a lip on the top. So if it fell face down, the screen itself wouldn't be hitting the floor.
Right. But the new ones, you got those new Kensington ones are probably better, or probably a good choice if you're looking for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I would recommend what we did. We just went to a variety of different companies. We just purchased one of the ones that we thought looked good. We had them come in, we looked at them, and we returned the ones that we didn't want. Obviously, then we got a refund. So that's an option, but it just depends on what you want it for. If you're going to just leave it sitting out all the time, I would recommend the Kensington because not only does it protect the device there, it keeps it from leaving. And there were some that did a great job, I thought, of keeping it from leaving. It's made of metal, the tether, the lock looked great, but it was just a narrow strip around the whole device. There was no protection on the back. There wasn't a lip around the front. I didn't feel like the device would be protected.
Yeah. Okay, another question. Going back to the camera on it, they want you to clarify your decision to trust the teens with having the camera, but not the adults.
Okay. I should explain that better. Okay, most of the time the camera is turned off in the teen space, and we go into restrictions on each iPad into settings, go into restrictions and turn it off manually instead of having it part of the profile. Simply because on occasion during programs the teen librarian will have them use the camera for specific things, like using the Sphere robots. It has to be able to lock onto the camera so that the device can see where the robot is. And then as soon as the program's over, she goes back in and turns it off, and if there were any pictures taken, deletes them. So it's not just on all the time sitting there.
It's a case-by-case situation.
Right, yeah. And I would say 95% of the time the cameras are turned off, but just, she's getting ready for a program. She doesn't want to take every iPad into her office, uninstall the profile, install a new profile that allows camera, and then take it back out. It's easier to just manually do it in that case.
And we have one last question. I guess maybe you didn't mention it. We were talking about all the things around it. Do you have overdrive on the iPads?
Yes, we do.
All right. Well, that answers that question. Okay. And it looks like that's it. All right. Thank you very much, Karen. And you saw her information up there, and as she said, her presentation and the handout with the how to do this yourself will be available along with a recording afterwards. Thank you very much, Karen.
You're welcome.
Okay.
And this is Lisa Voss again, and want to thank Karen for a terrific, thought-provoking presentation and some great questions. And what's good to know who's gone before and what they've experienced so we don't have to reinvent the wheel.